Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Brian. It is a new week, it's Monday, we're going to kick off a new theme, this one being music videos. Now, the criteria that I presented to my patrons was just it had to have a music video. It was brought up to me afterwards that it might have been better to have some qualifications, such as that the music and the video worked well together, or that it was audio-visual work that happened to have an audio-only version on the record, or something like that, where the video was something worth diving into analytically alongside the music. So I don't know what we're in store for this week. It may be that at the end of this week I decide, well, maybe we'll revisit this sometime in the near future with more of an emphasis on the video being worthwhile to explore alongside the music. But just for this week, I'm going to assume that we just listen to some cool music that happens to have music videos, and if I get anything beyond that, it'll just be a nice bonus. We're going to kick it off with some Depeche Mode. Enjoy the Silence is the name of this track. Let's dive in. So just two chords on those dingers.
Words like violence break the silence, come crashing into my little world. Painful to me, it's right through me. Can't you understand? Oh, my little girl. All I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here in my arms. Words are very unnecessary. They can only
Snare on 2 and 4, bass on 1 and 3. Fun little semi-syncopated hi-hat work.
vows are spoken to be broken. Feelings are intense, words are trivial. Pleasures remain, so does the pain.
Interesting, the bass line is following a 3-chord progression.
Unforgettable. All I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here.
Cool phaser sounds. I always love phasers, man.
Words are very unnecessary. They can only do harm.
So trading off the melody. Oh, the melodic idea. It's more chord shaping, arpeggiation.
All I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here in my arms. Words are very unnecessary. They can only do harm. All I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here in my arms. Words are very
texture layering there.
Enjoy the silence.
Okay. You know, with the track called Enjoy the Silence, they kind of assumed there was going to be more silence in there. I honestly thought that we were going to get 4 minutes and 40 seconds of silence, beating out John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds of silence. I suppose that works better in a live setting anyway, since the point of it is the ambiance of the room. Wouldn't make as much sense for a studio recording in a treated room, presumably with no audience there to be recorded. There's just not a lot of silence in here at all. Not even like a single beat. The classic stop, and then you get back into the music. There's just no moments of silence in here, which is really interesting for a track called Enjoy the Silence, where they decided expressly, it seems, not to include that core component into the music. I mean, silence is a key part of what music is. It's combinations of sounds and silence. That's a definition of music. And yet we didn't get any pure silence in here. We certainly got places where the instruments, specific instruments, weren't making noise, whether that's an instrument just not present at all or rests in the middle of a line. I don't think any instrument in here was just holding out chords. So there was emphasized silence within individual instruments, but not within the song as a whole. This is always making something, which maybe reinforces the final part of this track. A fade out followed by a vocal telling me to enjoy the silence, which now I can't. I mean, I'm breaking the silence with my speech, but the music video is not making any sound anymore. But I do wonder where this takes place in the album. If this isn't the album closer, that's kind of awkward, unless the next track is Silence, which would be pretty cool in context. I do hope, though, and maybe I'll go look this up later, I hope that this is the final track on the album. But there's just nothing after it. Enjoy the silence. You've listened to collections of sounds for 30, 40, 50 minutes. Enjoy the silence. Now, silence isn't really present in the music, but enjoyment is. This song goes down real easy. There is nothing in here rigid or abrasive or unpalatable. Honestly, it is a song that's just very easy to listen to. It's got a chill mood overall. Maybe the electronic drum beat isn't your vibe. To me, it's very 80s. I'm kind of at home with that sound in general. Not something I seek out, but I do find nostalgia within it. The vocals, the vocal harmonies, the vocal melody against the chord progressions, everything there is very easy to listen to, very palatable. There's nothing spicy in the chord progression. There's nothing spicy in the note choices. I'd even go a little bit further and say that this song is predictable in ways too. The chord progression follows what I would expect. The overall flow and pacing of the track is pretty much what I would expect. My biggest surprise was that at the end, we got some trumpets in there, but did they do anything different? No, they reinforced the melody that was already being played. They didn't even harmonize with it. I'm pretty sure it was the same pitches, so we just get the texture layering there. Maybe an octave higher, but I don't think it was a different pitch, a different note. So surprising in timbre, but predictable in composition. And that's not bad. I know, especially if you talk to prog heads, they're going to be like, "Oh, dude, predictability, that's trash. That if I can tell where it's going, it's a terrible track." Yeah, but I'm not like that, dude. I don't mind something that feels comfortable. You want to give me a verse, chorus, bridge, chorus track, I'm here for it. I'm going to see what's going on, and I might even really enjoy it. A lot of my favorite tracks are kind of typical for the genre they play within. As much as I love prog, I also just love a good pop song, and I think that's what this is. It is chill, it is relaxed, it is enjoyable. I enjoyed this song. I don't know if it's anything I would seek out. It doesn't really stand out to me in any way. I'm going to assume this might have been a bit more groundbreaking whenever it came out. I know Depeche Mode is a bit older. Giving the drum sample in here, I'm going to wager this was easily in the 80s, mid to late 80s probably. Maybe early 90s at the latest. And at that time, it could have been a new sound. To me, this is very... It's a well-tread road, but Depeche Mode might have been the ones who paved it originally. Regardless, it is very enjoyable, and that comes down to everything from, as I mentioned, chords, predictability, melodies, but also timbres. Nothing in here really feels out of place or challenging in any way. Even the vocals, they're very light. They're airy. Even when they have a bit more body to them, they're tasteful. They're not aggressive in any way. They're not overpowering. Everything in here is designed to be easier to listen to. And I think for a track about enjoying anything, that's certainly the way you want to go about it. Focusing a bit more on the compositional side of this, it's fairly straightforward. The drums consistently give us a backbeat snare, 2 and 4 accent, and bass kick on 1 and 3. The 3 sometimes gets a little interesting. Sometimes we get 2 eighth notes instead of a quarter note. Sometimes it's 2 swung eighth notes to give us a little bit of syncopation going into that downbeat snare on 4. Hi-hat is frequently eighth notes, 2 per beat. Very straightforward. It keeps the beat very much locked into sort of a human metronome vibe. There's some light drum fills in here, but nothing that really steals the spotlight, that directs your attention directly towards the drums. This is going to be a recurring theme here. I don't think any of the instruments are trying to steal any spotlight. When the vocals dip out, and honestly, I think the vocals are really only in the spotlight because the human ear likes to listen to human voices. So we kind of have a natural attention given to someone who is speaking or singing, but I don't really think there's too much in the mix that emphasizes them. They might be a little bit higher up in the mix, but honestly, it's not anything like modern pop music where the vocals are so much louder than everything else going on. But when the vocals dip out, it almost becomes background music, given how flat the mix is. Everything's kind of equally tuned, and how little adventurous writing there is on this. None of the instruments are doing anything to stand out at all. And it kind of creates something that feels very backgroundish, something that's trying its best to avoid your attention while still affecting your mood. Sort of like a good soundtrack in a film, you will notice when there is no sound, when there's no music going on, but usually the job of the soundtrack is to intensify the emotions of a scene without you noticing that the instruments are there. You're supposed to be paying attention to the dialogue, to the action, to the events, the visual component of it. And I think this song does a really great job of doing that, of trying to get out of its way in order to create a strong atmosphere, and that's about it. And so instruments not really doing anything to stand out is, yeah, that's a recurring theme on this. You may end up hearing me say that a few times. The drums, certainly though, the fills are very tasteful and on the lighter side and more sparingly used than I would expect. The bass gives us some walking bass lines. We get a lot of our harmonic information between this bass and a synth or a keyboard or something. We typically have 3 chord progressions throughout this track. What I find really interesting is that these 3 chord progressions are juxtaposed by 2 stinger chords. I don't remember what beat they came on, but I kind of did this at the beginning of the track when I started to hear these synthesized string hits. I called them stingers originally, but I don't think that's quite true. They are on the shorter side, but it's not an abrupt sting and then a complete reduction of sound. There is a general tapering off of the chord itself, but you get 1 chord and then a little bit of time and then another chord, a little bit of time, and then back to the first, even though the bass and the keyboard are playing the final chord of this progression now. I think that's really interesting. And if I had the sheet music for this, I would love to look into what's happening there harmonically, what kind of chord the bass is playing at this point for the first one, which lines up with the first chord of the strings, and then the second set of chords, but then the third set of chords, which is going to be a brand new bass idea underneath this original string chord. So it sounds fine. Again, this whole thing is about palatability. So it's not like we're creating tension or anything. It's just very rare for me to hear 2 different chord progressions simultaneously happening in any sort of pop or mainstream adjacent music. So, yeah, I mean, props to them. I really expected the strings to move along with the bass, or once I picked up on the 2 chord progression in the strings, to find only 2 chords elsewhere. There's a lot of music out there based around 2 chords, a rest or a home or a resolution followed by a tension or a guiding tone that's going to direct you back to rest, just bouncing back and forth between rest and tension, basically. Incredibly effective and very common. That's not what we had here, though. We had 2 and 3 simultaneously. Very interesting. Then we have some synth pads that kind of exist on the outsides and little ornamental ideas all over the place. We had that rising and falling synth where it's like, wow. And as it has this crescendo into the size, the volume of it, and then we have a decrescendo pulling the volume back. But also some of the times, I thought I found a pattern to this, but I did not. We also had a slide, a pitch slide. So instead of just we had and we kind of dipped in pitch as we brought the volume down too. So that was kind of cool. We had that phasery sound in here that I thought was pretty cool. I like the phaser, what do we call it? Like modulation. Pretty much anything. It's just such a cool sound. So I liked it here too. But generally this track, when I think about like how we get between ideas and what each section is trying to do, the structure of this track, it's kind of flat. There are some sections that are fuller with more layers, sure, and the melody changes between verses, choruses, and the eventual bridge. The melody primarily in the vocal line, although I suppose there were some instrumental melodic lines that adjusted throughout too. But does the vibe really change? I don't think so. I think every single part of this track has a very similar blueprint. But as I mentioned early on, there is a passing of the baton where one instrument will carry a melodic idea or a harmony, a chord progression, and then the next section, they'll give that to a different instrument. They'll continue on with pretty much the same chord progression, maybe a slightly modulated form of that original melody, but for the most part, for all intents and purposes, they're doing the same thing that the other instrument was doing previously. This allows some instruments to take on new lines so that we don't have just the bass player playing one 4-bar lick for the entire almost 5 minutes of this track. But it also allows the timbres to change, which creates sonic modulation. The song doesn't ever really feel like it gets old. It feels like it's always changing, even though nothing's really changing atmospherically. The chord progressions, the emotion, the feeling of this track, the lightheartedness of it, the rather chill vibes in general, and the digestibility of it all is extremely consistent, even though it feels like the song is constantly in flux. This works because of this passing of the baton style writing. And I think it's quite effective too. At no point in this did I feel like, wow, dude, this song is dragging. Because it honestly doesn't. It's changing just frequently enough to avoid that. But it's also difficult for me in retrospect, now that the song's been over for, oh geez, I've already been talking 15 minutes. Now that the song's been over for a while, I have kind of a difficult time remembering any specific section of it. It is simultaneously a blur, but also monolithic. I know that there are different parts in here. I know that there are different sections of the track. The brass is really the only thing that I distinctly remember, but I can't even hum back that ostinato. And it was only just a few notes that shifted in pitch with the chord progression. The note intervals were consistent throughout. I know that there are separate parts, but the song just feels like this one idea in my memory. And I think that's really what this is about. It would not surprise me if the lyrics were about finding peace within change or keeping consistency through chaos. You can't control your environment, but you can control your life, kind of motivational speech or something like that. But also the concept of enjoying the silence. I think particularly within, well, I know what that phrase means to me. I don't think I have much to relate it to the music. I was going to talk about how the world is noisy these days, both outside, all the machinery and technology and cars and everything, but also life is noisier than it's ever been, with social media connecting us to people's voices more easily than ever before. The idea of finding a calm amidst the silence, amidst the noise, by finding places of silence, places where you can meditate, where you disconnect from everything. I don't think that's what the song's aiming for, though. I don't get much of that musically, so yeah, I suppose let's dive into some lyrics here. I don't think there's anything else. There were some cool harmonies in here, particularly with the vocals that I enjoyed. But I think as far as like analysis, that's kind of it right there. Monolithic, ever-changing entity of a song that's designed to feel relaxed. A rather straightforward song lyrically. The chorus says, all I ever wanted, all I ever needed is here in my arms. Words are very unnecessary. They can only do harm. The general idea here is that what I need to live or to survive is literally what I can carry right here, both emotionally and physically. I don't need anything more than my immediate surroundings. It says that even something like words can do harm. And I think much like the music video of someone dressed like a king, at least trying to find a place for solitude, for calm, for serenity, comically with a lawn chair, going to these different destinations and just sitting there by themselves in nature. It's certainly that idea of isolation, of singularity. All that I need is just here, within me, within my arms. No one else, nothing else, just this. Now the verses are about, I believe, society or friend circles, people in general. It says, words, like violence, break the silence. Come crashing into my little world. They're painful to me and pierce right through me. The second verse says, vows are spoken to be broken. Feelings are intense, words are trivial, pleasures remain, but so does the pain. Words are meaningless and forgettable. Basically says that people can do a lot of harm. Never looks at the other side of this, that people can also help heal. But it is a focus on the harm that people can do to one another without physical violence. Specifically looking at words, vows, things that people say, lies that people tell, promises that people break. This is the gist I get, is that this person has been hurt by the people around him, and he only trusts himself now. His defenses, his walls around his heart are up. And now all he wants is solitary. Himself, that's it. And I suppose there is an olive branch extended. He does say that pleasures are still there after words are spoken. Does understand there are some positives, but he finds that in his experience, the negative component of being around people, of having social interactions and connections to people, is more painful than enjoyable. And so it's just easier to live alone. Not quite what I expected. And the command to enjoy the silence feels accurate for the perspective of the narrator, but definitely runs juxtaposed to the way I typically view human connection, which certainly you gotta take the good with the bad, absolutely. But I find it infinitely better to make the connections and expand one's horizon than to cut yourself off from the world entirely. All right. And it is a song primarily about serenity and calm, chill, finding music that's just fun. There is, I don't know if I'd call it an emptiness to the song, because certainly in portions of this track, there's lots of layers. It is very full track. But it isn't a joyous serenity either. There is a peace here, but I feel maybe influenced by the lyrics a little bit, admittedly. A little dash of negativity. I don't know what it is. A coldness, maybe? I don't think it's necessarily sadness or sorrow or anything like that, but numb, maybe. Let me know if anyone else feels that, a numb catharsis or a numb serenity. Again, though, I don't think I picked that up prior to the lyrics, or if I did, I didn't have the words to express it. It's quite possible I'm being influenced by my relationship to the lyrics here. But that's what makes art great, is we all get different things out of it. So these are my thoughts on Depeche Mode's Enjoy the Silence. What are yours? Did you enjoy it? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Do you have your own take, perspective, or opinion on this? Let me know. Toss all of that, as well as anything else you'd like to, into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.